Do you need a pen, Juan?
Oh, no, I have one.
Okay, good.
I was at work today and I saw a T-shirt. Someone came in wearing a T-shirt that I really liked. I thought it really fit in with what we're going to talk about tonight. It said, "Leaders know the way, leaders go the way, and leaders show the way."
Mm.
And I wrote that down and stuck it in my pocket. But that really kind of goes in with what we're talking about tonight, because as spiritual leaders, obviously we know the way. We got to know what we're talking about, and
Can you say that again? No.
Leaders know the way, leaders go the way, and leaders show the way.
No.
And we have to go the way to be able to lead by example, and obviously the whole purpose of teaching is to be able to show the way. Mm-hmm. So that really fit in good with what we're talking tonight, I thought. Okay. Ministerial Ethics, in my opinion, is probably the most important class we've talked about so far. Because you can take the information, you've got a lot of information through the other teachings, but this will help you avoid things that can blow the whole thing for you. Because ministry and ethics is everything. I mean, ethics in ministry is everything. If you don't believe it, watch the news. Because it seems like every few weeks or so, there's a spiritual leader has a scandal going on of some kind. Mm-hmm. And part of that is, again, we've talked about this before. Sometimes people get on a pedestal they don't have the ability to handle. It's possible for a person to be genuinely called and anointed, but not have the character to maintain that. Key example, Samson. Because he was, when you think about Samson, he was not a person you would think of as being a really godly man. Mm-hmm. He was very impulsive. He was driven by his sexual drive. But God anointed him in spite of that. And even though it caused him to be blinded and imprisoned, he got right with God in that prison cell, and his last word was, "Let me die with the Philistines." Mm-hmm. And that's the reason I say, when people are real quick to jump on the latest preacher scandal, mm-hmm. I can't speak for everyone, obviously, but I don't think most of them started off to be corrupt. Now, mm-hmm. It's been said that if you have the leadership skills to successfully pastor 100 people, you could be a millionaire in the business world. So ministry is not something a person's probably going to go into with the intent of doing that. Now, their ministry may take off and they get there, but that's probably not going to be their motive going in. But again, the 3 G's sometimes creep in: gold, girls, and glory. And, mm-hmm. Like I say, better men than me have been tricked up by that kind of thing. And, we have to rely on God's grace daily. And we're going to be talking about the practical insights to this. And I was telling Colleen, we're not going to be doing a test on this, just because as I went over the material, this is not really a thing that I can give you A, B, C, D questions about. But we will have what I think will be a really helpful project that I will go over as we finish up. I'm going to give you 3 foundational scriptures to start us off with. Let's first look at Hebrews chapter 13. Make sure this is still... Chapter 13, verse 17. Okay, recording's still in progress. I just want to make sure this is the first time I've used this for anything more than testing, so I want to make sure I'm doing it right.
You said chapter 13?
Chapter 13, verse 17. If you want to read that, John? Oh, well, you can take a sip if you want.
No, that's okay. Obey those who rule over you, and be submissive, for they watch out for your souls, as those who must give account. Let them do so with joy and not with grief, for that would be unprofitable for you.
So, in ministry, you are responsible for guarding other people's souls, literally. This is eternal matter, and it's very important we take that seriously. We will give an account for that. Okay, the next one is the book of James, chapter 3. Colleen, you want to read that one, chapter 3, verse 1? What translation do y'all, the both
James.
of you?
New King James.
Okay. You got the old King James?
No, yeah.
Okay. Actually, since you've got a new translation, do you want to go ahead and read that one? Because I'll explain in a minute. James chapter 3, verse 1.
Oh, James chapter 3, verse 1?
Yeah.
My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment.
The reason I say that, the King James word's at masters, and I think teachers is a better rendering of that. But again, teachers or people in ministry are going to be judged by a stricter standard than lay people will. Now, the ethical topics we'll be talking about, these are things that all Christians should do. Don't misunderstand, but for someone in leadership, it's especially important because if we fall, it has a lot more wide-ranging impact than if your average person were. Okay, finally we'll go to 1 Timothy chapter 5. And Colleen, would you like to do that one? Chapter 5, verse 22.
First Timothy 5.
22, yeah.
Lay hands suddenly on no man, neither be partaker of other men's sins. Keep thyself pure.
Okay, laying hands in this context is talking about laying hands on people to ordain them into leadership. So it's not something you do suddenly or frivolously. It's people whose gifting has been proven. Basically, what ordination is that your overseeing elders in your church recognize the calling on your life and they're willing to lay hands on it and endorse it. But that's a responsibility for the person doing that, because it says if the person doesn't live up to that, you can be held responsible for that.
Okay. That's a lot going on.
That is.
Yeah.
And that's why I tell you this topic is so important. I really wanted to let this be the last class we covered because I wanted that to be what you guys, the note you were sent out on. We weren't able to arrange the syllabus that way, but we got as close as we could. But, okay, getting into the syllabus now. What are biblical ethics? God's revealed truth about matters, doing what is good and refraining from what is evil according to the will of God. That's pretty straightforward. What is the will of God in the area? And that's not a secret. We can learn that just by reading it. Leave the old contact behind and put on new contact. Does someone want to turn to Ephesians chapter 4 and verses 23 through 24, just whichever one you get there first.
Okay. That you put off concerning your former conduct, the old man which grows corrupt according to the deceitful lust, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and that you put on the new man which was created according to God in true righteousness and holiness.
So if you're born again, act like it. That is what the name implies. I mean, there is a growth process that we're all going through, obviously, and that doesn't mean we don't stumble, but we are expected to live the new life, not like we did before. And Romans, that's basically what that same passage is, so I won't go there, but Galatians 5:22 and 23. Colleen, you want to read that one?
Yes.
Just turn back a few pages. Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, go eat popcorn.
Now say it again.
Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, go eat popcorn.
I may not forget that now. Go eat popcorn. GEP.
See.
But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law.
Oh, okay, exactly. And you notice this doesn't say fruits of the Spirit. The word fruit is singular. So there's one fruit of the Spirit with all these different facets of it. That really clarifies that, I think. Holiness, moral and ethical wholeness or perfection, freedom from moral sin, godlike character, sanctified, set apart for divine service. Again, that's something we're still growing in it. You know, in Pentecostal churches, there's sometimes a debate: is sanctification, the process of being made holy, is it an instantaneous thing, or is some people teach it as a second work of grace? And as I see it, it's both. There's, on one hand, yes, you are set apart for God to a holy purpose to mean you're born again. But there's also a growth in that. Yes, there's a second work of grace, there's a third work of grace, there's a fourth work, and there's as many as it takes to get us there till we get to heaven. Righteousness, holy and upright living in accordance with God's standards. Straightness promotes the peace and well-being of men in their relationships to one another. Okay, we're going to lay some foundational work here with the Beatitudes, Jesus' moral and ethical teachings, this greatest sermon ever preached from the Sermon on the Mount. We're going to look over to Matthew chapter 5. You can tell I'm saved. I got a lot of stuff stuck in my Bible. Okay.
Wish I'd have brought my other Bible.
Okay. That's fine. It's all good. But, well, this is an overview here, and we'll actually get into the actual verses in a moment, but instructions for the disciples on how to live their lives in front of people. It was initially taught to the 12 in Matthew 5 and 6 and half of 7. Then halfway through 7, the masses found Jesus, and he began to teach a salvation message. So that we see the practicality of Jesus. He was the embodiment of what it means to be instant in season, out of season. But the progression of Sermon on the Mount, recognizing and isolating sin, the motives in giving, prayer, and fasting, approaching maturity in pride in judging others, knowledge, taking in the Word of God. It takes discipline to obtain. It takes time to study and meditate the Word. If it was easy, everybody would do it. So it does take discipline. The intake of the Word and being a hearer of the Word, the output of the Word, putting out the Word is being a doer of the Word rather than just a hearer. Wisdom and knowledge are stabilizers. I liked the way Pastor Keith worded it one time when he said, knowledge tells you how to take something apart. Wisdom tells you how to take it back, put it back together.
Mm-hmm.
So they really go hand in hand with that. Wisdom, in a lot of ways, is the application of knowledge. Mm-hmm. In Matthew chapter 5, it talks about the new birth and the comforter and what it needs to be meek or teachable to inherit the land. That word meek sometimes brings up a bad connotation with some people. It doesn't mean being a wimp or a doormat. And the way you can look at it is take a horse, which is a very strong animal, but he has that bridle in his mouth, and he's subject to the person riding it. Mm-hmm. Wisdom, the correct output or input of knowledge. We've already discussed that. Mercy is grace in action, treating others as the Lord treats you, the law of sowing and reaping. We're referring to walking in forgiveness and reconciliation. Maturity is marked by your ability to rejoice despite the circumstances. Blessings will come when you are persecuted for righteousness' sake. And that's something that we need to understand that a little bit more. Obviously, compared to a lot of countries in the world, we have it pretty easy here. Now, that could change depending on the way the political climate goes. It's not looking good right now. But the worst persecution a lot of us will take would be some criticism, or may lose some friends or something of that nature. Now, that's not saying it couldn't happen another place too. But I've known people who would get a really spiritually haughty attitude. And I'll be blunt, I've known people that were just arrogant, self-righteous jerks. And if you question them about something, then you're persecuting them. Mm-hmm. You've probably encountered people like that too. Mm-hmm. And you have to be sure you keep a proper perspective on that. When someone criticizes you, and this is not easy, but the first reaction really should be to say, maybe there's something to the criticism. Is this an area I need to work on? It takes a lot of humility to do that, and I don't like it any more than anybody else does. But don't get defensive when someone criticizes you. Don't get a martyr complex about it, like some people do. If it is a legitimate thing, then learn from it. If not, then pray for the person.
Let it go in one ear,
sure.
not the other.
Sometimes people mean well when they do that.
I don't think that's what he meant, Golly.
Well, let it go in, then think about it for a minute, and then let it go. But it's don't let yourself get in strife about it. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. There are some people that mean well. Yeah. They may have been taught a certain way. Like people get when they see a Word of Faith church, there are a lot of stereotypes that go along with that. Mm-hmm. And I say, don't try to pigeonhole me with what you may have heard about Word of Faith movement or what you may have heard a certain preacher say. If you want to know what I believe, ask me. And a lot of times when they actually do, that clears up some things. You understand what I mean? So be prepared. You are going to take some heat from places, but be prepared for it and know in advance how to deal with it.
Okay. Were you here on Sunday when Pastor talked about the Possible name change?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if he said it in the second service.
Yeah, he did. Well, I mean, that's, if God tells him to do it, that's, that's the bottom line.
Yeah. But it was interesting that you brought up the appearance of things.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of connotations if you say word of faith. So I think that I thought that's what he meant.
It may be. I mean, I know he has shared before that when they were first at the church up here, there was someone who saw the sign and really started being belligerent about it.
Mm-hmm.
And really this is something I think is really damaging to the body of Christ, especially with the mass media and the internet the way we have it. You hear, quote, discernment ministries. Mm-hmm. And that's important. I'm not saying it's not. We are to discern what is right and wrong doctrine. Mm-hmm. But now anybody that wants to could set up a website and just skewer anybody they want to. And I try to be really careful not to caricaturize people. I mean, even if it's a person I may have some legitimate concerns about, I want to know where you're coming from before I form opinions. That's something I try to make it a point to do, because if you go in someone with a chip on your shoulder, you're not going to be able to minister to them. Even if they may be in error, they have to show that you're willing to at least accept them in the sense that you're not going to be unkind to them, because none of us are any less in need of God's grace than anyone else. And that's an attitude that will really help you a lot in life and in ministry also. Mm-hmm. Okay, now to some of the specifics of the Beatitudes. Does someone want to read Matthew 6, 1 through 18?
Matthew 6. One through 18?
Yeah.
We can.
If you want to tag team it, that's fine.
Yeah. Take heed that ye do not your alms before men, to be seen of them, otherwise you have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. Therefore, when thou doest thine alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, that thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret himself shall reward thee openly. And when thou prayest, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret. And thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. But when ye pray, use not vain repetitions, as the heathen do, for they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. Be not ye therefore like unto them, for your Father knoweth what things you have need of before you ask him. After this manner, therefore, pray ye, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Okay. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And do not lead us into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For yours is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. For if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive men their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. Moreover, when you fast, do not be like the hypocrites with a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces, that they may appear to men to be fasting. Assuredly, I say to you, they have the reward. But you, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, so that you do not appear to men to be fasting, but to your Father who is in the secret place. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly.
Okay. So that deals a lot with the attitudes of our heart when we do even all these commendable things, praying, fasting, giving to the needy. Obviously, you see a lot of celebrities, I'm giving $1 million to such and such charity. They want to make a big point about it now. But, that happens a lot of times in smaller settings too, in churches. That kind of attitude is prominent. And there are ministers who encourage it. Like, have you ever been in a meeting that say, anyone can give $1,000, come down front?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I can't judge the pastor's motive in doing that, but, that does kind of rub me a little wrong. Mm-hmm. Prayer, to be offered for others, and it should not be to seek recognition from others. Now, that's not condemning all public prayer. You remember in Acts, they came in together and they all lifted up their voices together in one accord, so that's fine. But the people who you ever had a relative that for Thanksgiving they ask you to pray over the meal and they go for 15 minutes? Mm-hmm. O Lordeth, who is in thine tenderest mercieth.
And plus, when you have the spirit of discernment, you know when someone is doing that to be seen by others or recognized.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
That comes with spiritual maturity.
Sure.
As well.
Sure. And you can do good things with wrong motives. Giving to the needy is a good thing. We should do that. But again, that's not to focus on, hey, everybody look at me.
Right.
I have heard I heard someone say that when they want to give to the needy, that they don't even give it directly to the person. They'll just say, hey, tell them someone who loves them wanted them to have this. A really neat thing that happened to me at a church I used to go to, I would do the intercessory prayer before the service. They had a special room for that. And I came out where my Bible and things were sitting in the seat, and there was a big bag there with some really nice ties in it. There's this anonymous note, James God told me to give you these. And there's some really nice, expensive ties. You see me wearing them at church sometimes. But, that's was one of those neat things that God just put on somebody's heart to bless me. And, of course, I received that. And I, to this day, have no idea who did it. But that's just the way it goes, mm-hmm. Fasting, a sincere spiritual experience between God and the person fasting, not a sign of spiritual maturity or goodness or to impress. Again, same idea. Okay, material resources and treasures. I'll go ahead and read this one. Lay not up, starting with verse 19. Lay not up for yourself treasures upon the earth, where moss and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be. Underline, star, and highlight that. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore the eye be single, the whole body will be full of light. That the light of the body is, in Jewish terminology, refers to being a generous person. But if your eye be evil, if you are a greedy or stingy person, the whole body will be full of darkness. If therefore the light that within thee be darkness, how great is the darkness? Again, mark this next one. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. And we're going to be talking about this more as we go.
Okay. How your pages are marked, Bunny?
When I printed that off, I use a cloud program called Dropbox, and I printed it from that, and like some of them, they just had an extra blank sheet, and I took those out.
Are we on the right page? Right after material resources, you got A, treasures, B, light, and C, slavery. It's
just, it talks about, being, you are the light of the earth, and, unfortunately, slavery did exist back then. He's given instructions to people who were in that, condition. Okay, rubber meets the road here. Qualifications for leadership. And does someone want to go to 1 Timothy 3? This is pretty much there are a lot of places you could go to, but this is kind of the standard. Outline of what the qualifications are for spiritual leadership. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 6.
I'll read it. 1 Timothy
3. Verses.
It says 33.
Oh, well, that's a misprint. Chapter 3.
Okay.
We just read that last week.
We did.
Yeah. Okay.
1 Timothy 3. Oh, gosh. The bishops.
Yeah.
This is a true saying. If a man desire the office of a bishop, he desireth a good work. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, must be able to teach, not given to wine, no striker, not greedy of filthy lucre,
Yeah.
but patient, not a brawler, not covetous, one that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. For if a man know not how to rule for his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? Not a novice, lest being lifted up with pride, he fall into the condemnation of the devil.
And I'll add verse 7 too. Moreover, he must have a good report to them which are without, lest he fall into reproach in the snare of the devil. Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to dissect this a little bit. First, he must be blameless. Now, that doesn't mean you're perfect, but it does mean you're a person of consistent moral character. It means you're a person whose example can safely be followed by others. You can say, follow me as I follow Christ. Mm-hmm. It means you're the same person on Saturday night you're on Sunday morning. Mm-hmm. The husband of one wife. Okay, that's a passage that gets, I think, misused in a lot of ways. Like, there are churches where I would not be allowed to be in leadership because I've been divorced. But that's not what that's talking about. Mm-hmm. If that was an absolute, that wouldn't apply to Paul because, it is absolute, but if it's the way people perceive it, it wouldn't apply to Paul because he was not married. Now, it has been suggested that he may have been married at some point in his life because he served on the Sanhedrin, and the requirement was you be married and have children. His wife may have died, or she may have deserted him when he became a Christian. We don't know that for sure. But basically, one woman, man, if you are married, or same would apply to women, you are faithful to your marriage. You're not a philanderer. You're faithful.
Last week when Pastor Keith went over that, he said.
You mean Pastor Diane?
No, Pastor Keith. He said. My mind just went. It was Pastor Keith. I'm sorry, my mind just went.
I'll come back.
You're fine. Yeah, if you remember, we can come back to it. Vigilant, sober, of good behavior. That's self-explanatory. Given to hospitality. Willing to be kind to people. Apt to teach. Obviously, you have to know what you're talking about. Now, go ahead.
It came back.
Okay.
Remember, Pastor Keith said, obviously, Pastor Keith thought that maybe Paul may have had an issue with women because also where it says for the women to be silent. Mm-hmm.
Well, the context of that is, it's discussing spiritual gifts, okay?
Well, I have a lot of drainage, so unfortunately, that and maybe occasional run to the bathroom will take care of that.
Yeah, do what you got to do. If you read the context of that, when he talked about, it's talking about spiritual gifts and proper operation, especially prophecy and tongues. If you remember that culture, men and women didn't sit together. The men would sit in the front, women would sit in the back. Mm-hmm. It talks about if the woman has a question, let her ask her husband at home. Mm-hmm. My understanding of that, obviously I'm open to correction, but the women were apparently sitting in they didn't have microphones and amplification. They were asking questions in a disruptive manner in the church. Right. And the problem was just keep it orderly. If you've got a question, don't interrupt whoever's teaching. Wait to get home and talk to your husband. That's not saying the woman can't teach or preach because we see other examples where they do. Right.
But the point I was saying was,
it's still stuffy in here. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Pastor Keith was just saying, that it appears that Paul may have had some issues with women. Do you remember that?
Oh, I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that's, my understanding of that passage.
Right. Yeah.
What was your understanding? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Well, in those days, men and women didn't sit together in church. The men would sit in the front, women would sit in the back. If you go to some of the old line Orthodox churches, you'll still see that practiced.
Or one will sit on one side
Right,
and
one on the other. And they didn't have microphones and amplification, so apparently the women in the back were shouting out and asking the husbands questions in a disorderly manner, where it talks about, if the women have questions, let them wait till they get home and ask their husbands about it. To me, that seems to be what it's being addressed. It's not saying women can't speak in church, because you see other examples where they clearly did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting you said that, because I was just at Lifeway. This is so funny this came up. I was in Lifeway on Saturday, and I was looking through what they call a chronological Bible,
Mm-hmm.
which I was strongly considering getting. And we got to the passage about Paul, which I wasn't looking for that. And it said historically, and this lines up with what you were saying, that that because at that point in time men were used to being taught and knew the word, then women did not know as much. They were just kind of being, because of the gospel, they were being brought in to that. And so there was some issues with, they were needing instruction at that time. And then also talked about that this thing about women who easily will allow themselves to be gullible by deceived teaching. They said it was not unusual for people who had deceived teaching to use women like that on purpose, culturally, because sometimes they were invited into the house to teach. Mm-hmm. So there was just some cultural things that were happening at the time. So I thought that was interesting information.
Well, back then, women generally didn't even learn to read.
Yeah. So
they were not educated. In fact, I'm going to tell you something I just learned recently that really blessed me. When Jesus was with Mary and Martha, and Mary was sitting at Jesus' feet in the living room, that was, in that context, was really a cultural taboo, because women were to stay in the kitchen, and the living area, the den, or whatever you want to call it, were reserved for men. It was not considered culturally appropriate for women to venture into that part of the house. Mm-hmm. But Jesus had no problem with all her coming and sitting and listening to him. So Jesus broke down the walls with that.
Yeah. I could see that, because I remember hearing something, too, that that Martha was actually doing what was correct at the time, that if you had a guest, you were supposed to be doing what she was doing. She was culturally following the norms of her culture. Mm-hmm. So you're right. It's like very much Jesus was encouraging something that was far different culturally.
Like when he talked to the Samaritan woman, I mean, the fact that he was willing, like the Samaritan race can be traced back to the Babylonian captivity, when the Jews intermarried with the Babylonians, and Assyrians or Babylonians, I can't remember right offhand which it was, but anyway, that brought them back to a very painful time in their history. I'm not saying prejudice is ever right, but I'm just saying that was the reason they felt that way. And for Jesus to be willing to reach out to someone of that race, and a woman on top of that, was radical for that time.
Yeah. Pretty radical.
Yeah, Jesus is a radical guy. Okay, but given to hospitality, someone who does kind things to people, apt to teach. Now, I will point out, you'll see later where he gives the qualifications of deacons. This is one of the key differences between an elder and a deacon. The elder is required to be gifted in teaching. The deacon is not. Mm-hmm. The elder is more of a spiritual leader, where the deacons take care more of the temporal needs of the congregation. Just as important of a job, but just different in structure.
Do you think that's the case here, too? In terms of how elders and deacons are split here? Not necessarily, because now that I think about it, we do have deacons who teach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, that's a deacon can be gifted in teaching, but it's not necessarily a requirement like it would be for an elder.
Okay.
Not given to wine. Someone who's not given to drunkenness, my personal advice would be not to drink at all. I'm not saying having a glass of wine is going to send you to hell, but my personal attitude has always been, you're not going to become an alcoholic if you don't take the first one. And even if it doesn't affect you that way, if you're going to be in spiritual leadership, you've got to consider the people who you're going to be leading. Could what you're doing there possibly put us, if you have alcoholics that are in your congregation, you probably will. Could that possibly cause them to stumble? I'll give you an example. You've heard me quote Charles Spurgeon a lot. He's one of my heroes in the faith. He smoked cigars. Now, in fairness to him, the dangers of smoking were not as widely known in those days. But that still put it like when the parents in the church would discourage their children from smoking, he would say, well, our pastor smokes, why shouldn't I? You can't pull a Charles Barkley. You are a role model. And what people see you do will be what a lot of times what they develop their standards by. That's not always fair that they would look at you in that capacity, because we're not perfect, we are growing, but that is a reality. And we do need to, again, to live our lives in a way where we're going to be safe for other people to follow. You understand what I mean? Okay, go ahead.
I may be jumping a little too quick, but right here on C, is that the practice? Not, what's that word? Hospitality.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's just cut off. Yeah.
Okay.
No striker, and it says not a brawler. Someone who's not given to violence or recklessness or inappropriate anger. Not that there's not a place for anger, but they know the right way to express it. Not greedy of filthy lucre, not a person who's in it for the love of money. And I'll tell you this, if this were consistently applied, there's a lot of big name ministries will go out of business tomorrow. Patient, obviously, not covetousness, along the same lines. One that rules his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. Now, if you're not able to be a proper leader and role model in your own family, where they live with you and they see all your flaws more than anyone else does, you can't really be expected to model that in front of people who don't know you as well. Billy Sunday used to say, your reputation is what people say about you. Your character is what God and your wife say about you. You've heard that.
Say it again?
Your reputation is what people say about you. Your character is what God and your wife say about you.
Okay.
Not a novice. Obviously, this is not something that a new Christian should, not that the calling would not be there, but that they need to grow and be mature before they can step into it. Lest being lifted up with pride, he fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must have a good report from them which are without. He has to have a good reputation, or she has to have a good reputation among people outside the church. There was something happened recently. There's a fairly well-known pastor who's came under discipline from his church for a number of things. I don't know the whole story. One of them was they felt he was being harsh with the people who work for him. Again, I'm not there. I can't really comment, but he did hire a PR person to help him handle the fallout from that. I've seen a lot of discussions that were really criticizing him for that. You know, you need to be before God and your church before you need to be to care about what people outside do. Well, that's true to a degree, but you do need to be conscientious about how you're perceived by people outside the church too. And I can't say he should or shouldn't use the PR person. I don't know. That's between him and God. But I can see the rationale behind doing that.
What's that?
Well, it's been news. Mark Driscoll, pastor of Mars Hill Church in Seattle.
Oh, the one that did all those teachings on Solomon?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I listened to his podcast.
Is that recent?
You can still find it in the news. There's been the verdict of the people he was accountable to was, and he admits himself that he was wrong in some things. They were not to the level he would be disqualified from ministry. But he said he is refocusing his approach. He's been off social media he says he plans on being off social media for at least the rest of the year. And he said his words, quote, "My angry young prophet days are over." I didn't really perceive that from the teaching I listened to. Yeah, he was blunt sometimes, but I didn't see him as being
angry.
Yeah. I mean, I've benefited a lot from his teaching, but
we don't know what
again,
happened
right,
behind closed.
Exactly. I can't speak to that.
We weren't there.
Exactly. I can't speak to that. So, I mean, I pray for him, and I don't, it sounds, from what I can tell, like the elders of the church are handling it properly. So, I really, again, I hope that ministry doesn't fall by the wayside because, I mean, it's doing a lot of good. But, again, we got to stick with the outlines being that God has pointed out. Hey, where were we? Okay.
Have we got to part 2 yet?
No, we're getting ready to do that now. 4 qualities for leadership. Joanne, you want to take the Ephesians, and Colleen, you want to take the Romans?
We're not going to do the First Chronicles?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I didn't have that marked, but
It's on
Where are
here.
we there?
okay. I'll tell you what. I'll go to that one. I'll read it.
Second Chronicles 17:36. Is that where you're going?
No, First Chronicles 28, 8 through 10.
You're not on the right page.
Where's my supposed to be?
Qualification.
I went too far?
Yeah. Second Chronicles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'll do the First Chronicles. And Joanne, if you want to do the Ephesians, and Colleen, if you want to do the Romans.
Okay.
First Chronicles 28, 8 through 10. 27. Now therefore in the sight of all Israel and the congregation of the Lord and the audience of our God, keep and seek all the commandments of your Lord your God, that ye may possess this good land and leave it for an inheritance to your children after you forever. And thou, Solomon, my son, know thou the God of thy father, and serve him with a perfect heart, and with a willing mind, for the Lord searcheth all hearts, and understandeth all the imaginations of the thoughts. If thou seek him, he will be found of thee, but if thou forsake him, he will cast thee off forever. Take heed now, for the Lord has chosen you to build an house for the sanctuary. Be strong and do it. This is, Ephesians 6, 6 through 7. Joanne?
Okay. Not with eye service as men pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with good will doing service as to the Lord and not to men.
Exactly, and that applies if you're in full-time ministry, but even if you're not, I mean, how you do your job, how you treat your people that you work with, that all applies into that. Exactly. Okay, Colleen, Romans 12:11.
Not slothful in business,
Excuse me.
fervent in spirit, serving the Lord.
I like that word fervent in spirit. Just think of a pot on the stove boiling over. That's how our spiritual life needs to be. Okay, next step, obviously, know God. I'll go to John 4:24. For God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. And that's one of the things that's important, that the spirit and the truth work together. If you have the spirit apart from the truth, you'll get into flaky stuff. If you have the truth without the spirit, you'll get into legalism.
You need both.
Exactly. And I don't know why you would want to do one without the other, to be honest with you. Okay. Let's see. Does anyone want to go back to Luke chapter 13?
Then one said to him, Lord, are there few who are saved? And he said to them, strive to enter through the narrow gate. For many, I say to you, will seek to enter and will not be able. When once the master of the house has risen up, has shut the door, and you begin to stand outside and knock at the door, saying, Lord, Lord, open for us. And he will answer and say to you, I do not know you. Where are you from? Then you will begin to say, we ate and drank in your presence, and you taught in our streets. But he will say, I tell you, I do not know you, where you are from. Depart from me, all you workers of iniquity.
Can you imagine what that would be like to be in that situation? You know, you're a religious person, you go through the motions, but the heart knowledge is not there. And there are lots of pulpits full of that. I hate to say it. And, you know, we're called to be the light that helps to bring change to that. Okay, Psalm 100, verse 2. I'll go ahead and read that one. I'm close to it anyway. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. So, serving the Lord should be a joy. It's not a drudgery. It's not a legalism. It's something we do because that's the greatest desire of our heart. And again, we have to model that to the people we lead also. Okay, Romans 12. Would someone like to go ahead and read that whole chapter? If you want to tag team it, that's fine too, because there's a lot of material there.
Okay.
You want to start off?
Yeah. I'll take it at first.
Okay, go ahead.
8.
Oh, you want me to go start?
Yeah.
I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. For I say, through the grace given to me, to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith. For as we have many members in one body, but all members do not have the same function, so we, being many, are one body in Christ, and individually members of one another. Having then gifts differing according to the grace that is given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, let us prophesy in proportion to our faith. Or ministry, let us use it in our ministry. He who teaches in teaching, he who exhorts in exhortation, he who gives with liberality, he who leads with diligence, he who shows mercy with cheerfulness.
Let love be without dissimulation.
Abhor. Abhor, hate.
Abhor that which is evil. Cleave to that which is good. Be kindly affectionate one to another with brotherly love and honor, preferring one another. Not slothful in business, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing instant in prayer, distributing to the necessity of saints, given to hospitality. Bless them which persecute you. Bless and curse not. Rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep. Be of the same mind, one toward another. Mind not high things, but
Condescend.
Consent to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits. Recompense to no man evil for evil. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourself, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good.
So, do either of you see any insights in there you'd like to share? Notice how it starts, that every believer is to... Go ahead.
Oh, no. I was going to say something. Go ahead and finish your thought.
Every believer starts off, or is supposed to, present their body a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God. Use me whatever way you want to. And it basically tells us all these different things. Whatever gifting you have, use it. If you are a pulpit minister, fine. Whatever it may be, that doesn't mean God loves you any less or has less of a plan for you. Just whatever He's gifted you to do it with all your heart.
Do it with a spirit of excellence.
Exactly, with that fervent spirit, where you do it because it's a joy to you. It boils out of you. Joanne?
Yeah, similar to what I was going to say.
Okay.
That same thing.
Okay. But again, obvious points it brings out here. Love must be sincere. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Honor one another above yourself. Practice hospitality. Must include loyalty, diligence, and teachability. Teachability does not mean gullibility. There's a big difference. Okay, be strong and do it. 1 Corinthians 7, I'll flip over there.
I do have one thing to point out.
Sure.
something I've learned and something I'm still kind of chewing on. And he says, I lost it. Having then gifts differing according to the grace that is given to us, let us use them. That God does give a measure that's different for each person depending on their function. And I've often thought why you know how some people may be anointed that money just comes to them. Mm-hmm. And a person right next to them could say, but I give money too. I'm faithful with my tithe, I'm faithful with my offering. But mm-hmm. this one seems like they have this Midas touch. Mm-hmm. As soon as they do something or plant a seed in this area, God just blesses them. Mm-hmm. And I could say that for different variety of things, but I'm really just being observant. I'm really beginning to see that sometimes I feel like God anoints people in ways according specifically to the grace He's given them. Mm-hmm. And then there's some people, they're just going to have, for example, a touch with kids. And someone who may enjoy kids may not have the same touch. Because I think it really depends on the grace.
New message from Larry Keith.
So I really believe that there's something to that about not comparing ourselves to people. Sure. And understanding what grace has God given you to accomplish a certain task in His kingdom. So.
And it's as unique, the giftings like that are as unique as people's personalities are. Mm-hmm. There are differences between natural talents that God, like a person may be a great singer. Singing in itself is not necessarily a spiritual gift. It's a God-given natural talent that God can anoint. Mm-hmm. But like I've heard people say, like, I sing, that's my spiritual gift. Not exactly. Mm-hmm. But it does describe people who are gifted to be givers. So that may be part of what you're discussing, people who are money magnets, for lack of a better term.
Exactly, because they're...
New message from Larry Keith.
Excuse me one second. Let me text him back. Oh.
Well, the air's not working. That's for sure.
May I go to the restroom?
Yeah, go for it.
Go for it, Colin.
Finish.
Usually this is either going to be the coolest place.
Yeah.
Usually it's on the cooler end. That's part of the building. I'm congested, so that doesn't help. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now I'll pause it. I don't want anybody listening. Let's just have a bunch of dead air.
Oh.
Okay, we are back. Okay. 1 Corinthians 7:37. Okay. Nevertheless, he that standeth steadfast in his heart, having no necessity, but has power over his own will, and has so decreed in his heart that he will keep his virgin, doeth well. Settle your mind that you're going to live. The context here is sexual purity, and that would certainly apply. But whatever it is, you settle that in your mind. It's a conscious choice you make. Okay, we're going to talk a little something that's not in your outline here, but turn over to 1 Corinthians 9. If someone would like to read verses 24 through 27.
Hold on. 1 Corinthians 9.
Yeah.
And this is not in my notes.
No. Oh, no, wait. Hold your place there. There's one I looked over, Ephesians 4:1. Could someone read that first? I apologize for that. I knew I had that somewhere.
I'll read it.
Okay.
I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you that ye walk worthy of the vocation wherewith ye are called.
So it's important to walk worthy of that calling. It's a very holy thing, and we've been reflecting this all along. Our lives are to reflect that. And there is a danger that if we don't do that, there is a danger of disqualification. 1 Corinthians, I'm over there, so I'll go ahead and read it to you. But I want to write this down and actually spend some time meditating on it. 9:24 through 27. Know ye not that they which run the race run all, but one receives the prize, so run that they may obtain. And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. So an athlete who's training to go for a championship, they exercise a lot of discipline to do that, and that's good. They should, but they're going after a temporal crown where we are going after eternal crowns. I therefore so run, not as uncertainty, so I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I bring under my body and bring it under subjection, lest by any means what I preach to others, I myself should be a castaway. So Paul himself, great man of God that he was, recognized that if he didn't stay on top of his own his own body, his own drives, emotions, desires, he himself could be disqualified. And that's a sobering thought. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. Mm-hmm. There are a number of things that could lead up to that. The two big things you see most often are sexual or financial misconduct. You know, we talked about Driscoll earlier having the issues that they don't feel he was always as kind as he should have been to the people who work for him. Mm-hmm. That he is under discipline, but apparently that's not something that's going to permanently disqualify him. Mm-hmm. And really, is it possible for someone who's had a serious moral failure to be restored to the ministry? Sometimes yes. But going back to the qualification we gave a person who is supposed to live morally above reproach, be faithful to his family, to keep a good reputation with those outside. If you've done something to tarnish that, it's very difficult, if not impossible,
to
regain it.
You may have to move to a whole new different state,
well,
area.
Even then, that could be one way you could avoid visible consequences, but still that doesn't really deal with the root cause of it.
Right.
Is it Jeremiah that talks about the potter's wheel, how you go to the potter's house and the broken clay has to be remade into completely different? That really is the way it usually has to be done. God can certainly forgive and restore the person. He can still use that person. But will it be on the same capacity?
It could take years.
I mean, think about the big name guys that have had the moral failures. Swaggart, Baker, Tilton, guys like that.
Robert Tilton,
exactly. I mean, I can't judge any of those men's hearts. I hope they have been restored to God. But will they ever be what they once were? No, not going to happen. There are others you could name too. Were you going to say something, Joanne?
Same thing.
I know a personal minister who was in the area, and the same thing we're talking about. God will restore and continue to use him, but to the capacity to where God was using him, where God was taking him. Not in this area, anyway.
Sure.
And he ended up leaving and going to another state.
Yeah.
That's why I said that.
Sure. I mean, again, it may be a matter where you would need to relocate, but even then, that's not a matter you jumped into the place hoping you can get back in. Really, a person who has the right attitude, and someone who pastors a big church, that's going to be a major loss because, they might lose their income. They will definitely lose their place in the community. That's going to be really costly. Mm-hmm. And again, looking from a natural standpoint where they would be doing the damage control trying to get it back, but spiritually speaking, the right attitude would be go to the people that you are accountable to. That will vary among the denominations or whatever structure you have, and be honest about it. Be honest with the people you lead, and just don't even let returning to ministry be a factor. Just put it to God. God, I'll scrub toilets. I'll do whatever you want me to do, and whatever direction He chooses to bring it in, then that's fine.
The elders even, he was surrounded by 10 to 12 different elders, and the elders confronted him privately behind closed doors in his office, and he said, "I'm not giving this up." Mm-hmm. And so the elders said, "Well, you're stepping down. We're not going to back you." in this, so it was a big issue.
Sure. Well, going back to Jimmy Swaggart, he was ordained with the Assemblies of God. That was the only church he'd ever belonged to his whole life. And Jimmy Swaggart Ministries in their heyday was one of the key employers in the Baton Rouge, Louisiana area. It was big stuff. Mm-hmm. Now, your typical Assembly of God church, now there are huge mega churches, they're Assembly of God, they're little tiny ones. Your typical one, though, probably 150 to 300 people, not really big. And Assembly of God churches would go in together and they would sponsor Jimmy Swaggart's crusades. He was by far their biggest draw. A side of this that didn't really get discussed is when he fell. The Assemblies of God gave him a choice. You can step down for a year, you can get counseling, and we'll go from there, or you're going to have to relinquish your credentials. He chose to relinquish his credentials. Now, with all the money he brought into the Assemblies of God, that was a major sacrifice. People didn't really focus on that so much, though. Mm-mm. But they stood by the principles, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. Anyone who continued to be on his staff would have to leave the Assemblies of God, and most of them, as I understand it, did resign. But that was the thing. They were willing to stick by their principles on that, and God bless them for that.
What happened to him?
Well, his church is still there. I mean, from what I've read, you go there now, they have black curtains hanging in the back seats, so the empty seats are not as obvious. There were people that were continuing to support him until he got caught with another prostitute sometime after that. And I think his son, he's up in years now, so I think his son is taking on more ministry responsibility. I can't speak for him. I don't know. I notice sometimes when I'm flipping channels, I see Donnie Swaggart's television program coming on. I've never actually watched him, so I can't say. But Jimmy Swaggart is a fascinating man. I've read a couple of biographies about him, and I bring him up sometimes when we're talking about this just because he's an example. I don't believe he went into ministry for the wrong reason. I believe he had very good motives starting up. But one of the biographies I read talked about how he had battled an addiction to pornography since he was a child. Mm-hmm. And someone brought up a point that if you, say you're watching one of his sermons on TV, you can hit mute and watch the way his body would gyrate. Mm-hmm. It was really sensual. Mm-hmm. And even his gospel music that he played, he's related to Jerry Lewis and Mickey Gilley, and his gospel music, though, is very similar to the same saloon style. He was really down on Christian rock for sounding too worldly, but, his country music, his type of music sounded a lot like that kind of the country music, too. But, he approached ministry from a really arrogant, caustic. When Jim Bakker fell, he called him a cancer on the body of Christ. Mm-hmm. And it was a big thing. The two of them and Marvin Gorman got in a big war of words. And, when it came forward that Swaggart was doing some of the same thing. Now, I could be wrong on this. And this may have been where he was rationalizing it. And forgive me if I'm getting a little graphic here. He would get the prostitutes and take lewd pictures of them, but I don't think he ever actually had sex with them.
You're talking about Jimmy Swaggart.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but that was my understanding. That may have been how he rationalized. Obviously, that was wrong anyway, and that was a very foolish thing to do. But if he would have came forward with this problem earlier on in his ministry, or even at the very beginning of it, and got the help he needed, he could have avoided all that.
Do you think that goes back to setting people in ministry before their time?
Possibly. Again, I can't speak to that in every case, but it could be. And
it is obviously on a lot of cases.
Sure, and in him being a case, Jim Bakker being another one, that their ministry takes off in a level far beyond anything they could have ever imagined. You got that kind of money coming in, you got that kind of attention. That's what I'm saying. Most people could not handle that. And again, I'm not defending what they did by any means, but I'm just saying that I try to understand why things happen, and hopefully you can learn from the examples and either avoid it yourself or help someone else avoid it,
Mm-hmm.
I think, too, a part of that, like, say, with Jimmy Swaggart, that, like, you look at his cousin, who went the other extreme in terms of a worldly life.
Sure.
But he was more true to himself and his sin than I think Jimmy was.
Sure, absolutely.
Because I think he went more religious, and I think that the more religious in your manner and who you are, you're not really technically receiving God's grace for your life. And we have a problem even in this area when pastors said that Knoxville was the that we're in the Bible Belt, but we're the buckle of the Bible Belt, and the religious spirit is so strong.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really sets up people to sin.
Sure.
I think so, because you're really living you're not really living under grace, you're living under law.
Sure. And grace is the most liberating thing from sin there is, if you understand that. Now, I can relate to that because the little town where I grew up in, when I first even started reading the Bible, but I don't think I'd actually become born again yet. But I was just starting to kind of explore it, and I would see these teachings, and most people I knew went to church. But I'm thinking, the people I don't live like this.
Right.
And I mean, I was a member of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and I would see the guys go up there giving their testimony and then bragging about how much how drunk they got the night before. You know, that's. In fact, I knew a guy that said he'd go out partying on Saturday night, go to church sober up on Sunday morning, and that kind of revealed to me this is not something. I mean, I'm not perfect by a long shot. Don't get me wrong, but this is, if you're going to do this, be serious about it. If you're going to go to hell, go full tilt. You know, don't even.
Yeah.
Exactly, which is why Jesus said, "I'd rather have you cold
or
hot,"
hot.
because even someone who's cold, there's more hope for them.
Exactly.
To bring them back. When you're lukewarm, you're always thinking, "I'm okay."
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm kind of straddling. I don't have to think too much about. So.
Exactly.
So I know for me personally, grace has helped me, because I know even when I became a Christian, it was always about the do's and the don'ts.
Mm-hmm.
That in terms of what it meant to walk with Christ.
Sure.
So there's always the fear of breaking a rule. I remember, like, one of the first things I did was as a born-again Christian, because that's what the Fellowship of Believers believed in. You're not supposed to listening to secular music. It's the devil's music. And I remember breaking all my records, but that wasn't grace. Because I had not learned to walk in grace. So I was already walking under law and fear.
I had a similar time to that, too. And I got rid of all my rock and roll records, even my Christian rock records. And, you know, over time, and that caused me to get into pride because I did this. I was a better Christian than you if you haven't done that.
Right.
And I got to where I was thinking that, and what kind of brought me around, the Bible never calls any genre of music sinful in of itself. Now, there's a lot of bad stuff out there, don't get me wrong. And this is where that can really be counterproductive in a lot of ways. People who get into the bubble mentality, never watch TV, never go to a movie, never listen to anything other than Christian music. And there's Christian music that has flaky theology in it, so you have to.
Yeah.
But people like that never develop the ability to discern.
There you go. That's good.
I mean, and I listen to lots of different kinds of music, and there are songs by certain people I listen to, but not others. Like a secular group may have one song that I don't find anything morally objectionable about. I don't have a problem listening to. They may have another song that I ain't putting this in my head. You know, so it goes on a case-by-case basis. And like one time Zoe was watching, the twins were watching me. Zoe asked me this. It was a Disney movie, and a preacher that said rap was the devil's music. And she goes, "Daddy, is that true?" I told her, I said, any kind of music can be used for good or bad. You know, so I try not to make blanket statements. And what I try to do with my kids, I don't tell them you absolutely can never listen to certain music or watch certain shows, but I'm more inclined to watch it with them and say, okay, this is what this person did, and this is why you should or you shouldn't do this. And if you look at it with that kind of mentality, like I'll tell you a show that a lot of people wouldn't think about, but even Christian organizations are promoting in some ways. You remember the show Breaking Bad? Now, there is a lot of language and a lot of violence and things like that you got to watch out for. But if you look at the overall picture of it, the man starts off, he's diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he starts selling drugs under the quote, the guise of he's paying his medical bills and wants to support his family. He seems to be having what you might think of noble reason for doing a very bad thing. And before too long, it's completely snowballed. He's murdering people left and right, you know, and it shows how when you start to give yourself over to that kind of thing, how you give the devil an inch, how far he'll take it. Again, it's not a Christian show, and if you're easily offended, it's not a show you're going to want to watch. But I'm just saying, looking past that, there is powerful truth behind that. You understand what I mean?
Oh, I know what you mean. And I think it goes back to what you said, which was good. discernment.
Exactly.
There are things that I've learned or God has shown me through secular movies
Sure.
that for another person might be
Sure.
offensive, but because I was receiving a spiritual message from it, then even some of the things that were offensive did not affect me had I just walked in straight
Yeah.
and looked at it on the surface.
Well, you keep in mind that the show is about sinful people. Sinful people act like this.
Yeah.
And it goes back, if you're trying to shield yourself from any reference at all to sex, violence, whatever, one of the first books you're going to have to throw away is going to be this one. Because, the Bible describes a guy getting a tent peg hammered through his skull. It describes, we've talked about Song of Solomon. It's very explicit, but it's understood the context of that. And there are secular TV shows and movies that show, yes, people do bad things, but they reap the consequence of that. And, Donald Gray Barnhouse was a famous Bible scholar. He said all of life echoes God's truth. And if you learn to just see truth in things, even if it may not be pretty, you're going to save yourself a lot of struggle in life, I think. That's the thing. I don't look at this is a certain kind of music he should or shouldn't listen to, a certain style. Just use discernment with anything that goes in your mind. And that's, and that includes what preachers you listen to, what Christian music you listen to, because that's something you've got to be especially on guard about.
It's good. That's a sermon, see? Mr. James, you got to teach on that.
Yeah, we do it sometime.
Discernment versus law.
Hey, that's good. Mind if I plagiarize your title there?
Go ahead.
If anybody hears this sermon in the future, I'm giving Joanne credit right now.
But that's your sermon.
Okay. Okay. But anyway, the point I was making there is it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Okay, and closely related to this is the attitude of leaders. And you can do the right thing with the wrong attitude. With a proper attitude, we have the ability to learn easily and quickly, and it can attain our highest potential. Each individual must take the responsibility to correct his or her attitude to align with the will of God. And especially in ministry, again, we go back to, if you're doing you're not in ministry to be a politician or to be an entertainer. If you're in it for any other reason than glorify God and to help people, you're doing it for the wrong reason. Heart attitude. Leaders need a heart that is properly motivated, a desire to please God in everything. Let's come back to Second Chronicles, I'm sorry, and we can read both of those while we're over there.
Second Chronicles 17.
First we'll go to 1736, and whoever gets there first can read it. Oh, wait a minute.
1736.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. There is no 17.
That's another misprint. I did not do this, mind you. I didn't make that typo the first time either.
So how are we going to find which one?
Okay, let's just go to the next one. 2 Chronicles 25:2. I'm sure there's a verse 2 in there.
There is.
Okay, I'll go ahead and do the first two verses. Amaziah was 20 and 5 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 20 and 9 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jehoadan of Jerusalem, and he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, but not with a perfect heart. So again, you can do the right thing with the wrong motivation. Anything that puts you in the public eye has the potential to put you on ego trips, whether it's ministry, entertainment, sports, whatever. And there was a teaching, and the heart of it was right. We should honor our spiritual leaders, absolutely. But it got to the point where they were put on a pedestal there were movements that were putting leaders on a pedestal to an unhealthy degree. And that led to a lot of ego problems among those particular ministers. And while, yes, we do honor our spiritual leaders in a special way, I'm not distracting from that at all. 1 Corinthians 12 talks about how all members of the body are worthy of honor. So honoring a spiritual leader does not give you the right to look down on any other member of the body, no matter what they do, because if it's not for the other members of the body doing their job, you're not going to do yours. Two aspects of submission, an attitude as well as an act of the will. Willingness, ready to act, inclined or favorably disposed to perform, not choosing to refuse. Or obedience, performing what is required or abstaining what is from what is forbidden. You have to be both willing and obedient to eat the good of the land. You can be willing without being obedient. You can be obedient without being willing. You have to be both.
Otherwise you'll be unhappy.
Exactly. And in fact, those are some of the most unhappy people you'll find anywhere.
Especially in ministry.
Yeah, exactly. Or any Christian, but yeah, especially.
Because I was thinking of Jonah, that even after saving all those people, he was miserable.
Exactly.
So he never enjoyed the fruit of labors that God actually gave him credit for.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
He never really got to, so that's very sad, actually.
It is. Very much so.
Yeah.
I heard a funny story. In fact, this is another Christian leader from the past that had a serious failure, but Mike Warnke, I don't know if you remember him or not.
I remember the name.
Mike Warnke, this has been years ago. He claimed he had a testimony that he was a former satanic high priest and things.
yeah.
Right.
That all turned out to be a lie, or at least most of it.
Really?
Yeah.
He wasn't?
No. At least it was greatly exaggerated, if not outright lies. And that brought his ministry down.
Why would he lie about being a Satanist?
I don't know.
I've got a video still yet of
I've heard it. I've heard that too.
Ooh, that is
I've read his
terrible.
book.
I've not read his book, Mike Warnke. So he lied about being a Satanist.
You can look it up on the internet. It's common
terrible.
knowledge. But a funny story, he was kind of a Christian comedian, and he did tell some funny stories.
Yeah.
And one of them was he talked about Jonah got swallowed by the fish, and then he came out, we came out of there, God got his attention to go to the Ninevites, and he came out with his skin all bleached, pale white, piece of seaweed around his neck, and he comes out and tells people, repent. But, okay, willing mind. Let's go ahead. Okay, I'm already in 1 Corinthians. Does someone want to take the 2 Corinthians? And I'll read 1 Corinthians, and the other one can take 1 Peter.
I've got 1 Peter.
Okay.
Oh, you would.
I'm right here at it.
Okay. So, Joan, you got second?
I was going towards 1 Peter.
I didn't even know it.
That. So it's 1 Corinthians 1:10?
Well, if you want to do 2 Corinthians, well, yeah, go ahead. You can do that. I'll do 2 Corinthians 8:12.
Oh, okay, because I'm not in the neighborhood of either.
Okay.
So.
Okay. 2 Corinthians 8:12. First, there first be a willing mind that is accepted according to that a man has, and not according to that he has not. Like Pastor says, God's not concerned with the $1 million you don't have as much as he is the $5 you do. Are you going to be faithful with that?
Okay, 1 Corinthians 1:10. Now I plead with you, brethren, by the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you all speak the same thing, and that there be no divisions among you,
Exactly.
but that you be perfectly joined together in the same mind and in the same judgment.
It goes back to ministry being able to keep people together. That's a very difficult thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Colleen, you got 1 Peter 5:1-4.
The elders which are among you I exhort, whom am also an elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that shall be revealed. Feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind.
Exactly.
Neither as being lords over God's heritage, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd shall appear, ye shall receive a crown of glory that fadeth not away.
Exactly. So the willing heart is everything. I mean, again, this goes back to motives. You're not motivated because you're being forced into something or because you're doing it for the money. You do it because you're a willing servant of God, and you want to help other people be too. Reaction causes scattering. I'm thinking about Moses, and you remember while he was up on the mountain, the people didn't have his leadership there, and the golden calf came out of that. And responding, though, to God's call in the appropriate way provides capable leadership.
Now, wait a minute. I didn't understand the one about Moses. You mean his reacting to...
Well, no, when Moses was away in the mountain, the people there were without his leadership. And in the absence of his leadership,
that's what you're referring to. Okay.
Exactly.
Because I was thinking you meant when he had a reaction and he hit that rock.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't cause scattering.
Mm-hmm. No, the scattering was while he was gone. Okay. Now we're going to come to this last part here, the minister's code of ethics. I'm not going to sit here and read the whole thing. You can do that on your own, but this is going to be your assignment.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Okay. Suppose I'm sitting there watching TBN or Daystar, or one of the Christian TV programs, and I see a program coming up by Colleen Trent Ministries or Joanne John Jock Ministries. I'm sitting there thinking, I like what this lady has to say. I like what this lady has to say. It's almost like I taught them some of this stuff myself, But I want to become maybe a financial partner with you. But obviously, given all the things that go around with ministry that we talked about, I want to know where you're coming from. So I go on your website, and I want to see your statement of ministerial ethics. How is the money used? What kind of accountability structure do you have? I want you to draft me I'm not even going to be real strict, 1 to 2 page roughly.
Is that recording?
This is. 1 to 2 page roughly, but again, if you can do it in 1 page, knock yourself out. I'm not going to be I'm looking more for quality than I am quantity this time. But if I'm going to be a potential supporter of your ministry, if you're a pastor, I'm going to be someone who may be visiting your church, but I want to know what your ministry is about. I want to know that the money I give you and the service I give you is going to be going to the right purposes. Give me a statement of your ethical principles of your ministry. How is the money used? Who decides what is used for what? What sort of standards do you have as far as ethical issues, sexual purity, and things like that?
Oh, goodness. But not easy, Simon.
But you're not going to have a test, so that...
I would rather have a test right now.
No, the reason
oh my goodness.
I'm not doing a test just because this is not really the kind of thing where I can say A, B, C, D answers to. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Just give me a statement of guiding principles for a ministry that you oversee. Again, I'm not going to be real picky about how long it is, but convince me that you are a legitimate ministry for me to support.
So, for example, when there's the list of a good bishop, would those be considered?
Certainly keep those in mind, how you act those out in your own ministry or put those into play.
So if I were to put that, I'm just using that as an example, but let's say, okay, in this is what you would be looking for.
Sure.
Is that what you mean by code of ethics?
Yeah, code of ethics.
I want to make sure I understand.
Yeah, written code of ethics.
Because isn't that considered a code of ethics
Sure.
per se by saying this is what you want to see in your bishop?
Sure, exactly. If I'm going to attend your church, if I'm going to support your ministry, I want to know what I'm putting my time and my effort and my money behind.
Okay. So then there's my next question, audience. Are you talking, can our only audience be someone who's going to be a partner in the ministry, or could it be the kinds of people you want involved in the ministry?
Whatever.
Can you approach it at different angles?
I'm using it as a hypothetical, but
okay.
Yeah, whatever. Again, I don't know what kind of ministry you guys have in mind for yourselves eventually, if any. But if it's not a pulpit ministry, kind of put yourself in that spot for this assignment. But whatever, if it's a pastoral ministry, TV ministry, whatever, but just assure me that if I'm going to come to your church, I'm going to do whatever for your ministry, I'm putting it into good soil. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I wasn't, if that's okay with you, I wasn't limited to that.
Sure. No, not at all.
Like a partner.
No, not at all. I'm giving you that as an illustration, but no, yeah, use your imagination. I'm not going to be real strict with it as long as you get in the core of what we talked about. Use your Bible, use your notes that we've discussed here today. There should be plenty to pull from. And like I say, I'm not even giving you a strict length requirement for this one.
That's different.
One of the things that this has been, I was on a Ministry Watch website one time about ministries, how we're graded for how transparent they are with their different kinds of dealings. And I looked for several prominent Word of Faith ministers. Every one of them scored an F.
What?
F, as far as A, B, C, D, F.
Right, yeah.
Except for Joyce Meyer got a C.
For what, again?
Well, as far as how they responded to the questions that the people asked, Joyce Meyer does put her financial statement on her website, which is something a lot of ministries won't do. But that got her points for that. And she is always, like when the Senate was investigating some of the famous preachers a few years ago, she was one of the most cooperative with that.
Oh, in terms of the financial area?
Yeah, as far as being visibility. So I'm just giving you that as an example. Like I say, use your imagination. I'm not being real strict about it, but I do want to see, what a ministry you'd be overseeing is about.
I think I may have done that in my dissertation.
Okay. Then you can use your own material again. That's fine. Okay. Do you have any questions? You still look a little. I don't mean to trip you out or anything.
No, it's just more of a stretch. That's all.
Okay. Well, feel free to call me or text me or anything if I can be of help to you. I'll be glad to. If you got anything you want to run by me, feel free.
Yeah, okay. I guess I'll have to see. I have to put some thought into it.
And again, if you could bring it next week, fine. But if you need another week, I'm not going to penalize you for that either. So as long as you have it in within 2 weeks, we'll be fine with that.
Okay.
I know this is, like you say, this is stretching a little bit, so I want to be as lenient as I can be.
Okay.
Looks like I will not be here next week. Karen said she's going to need next week for Acts, but I will. But if you want to just leave it with her, I'll get it, or however.
Or leave it with Pastor.
Pastor, that's fine.
Church planting is what we're supposed to be doing next week.
Okay.
Oh, he's teaching next Monday?
I think so.
Okay.
You can double check that to be sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because he just texted me. That was what he texted me about just now, asking me if I was going to be finished up tonight.
Oh, okay.
So he knows that he's teaching.
Okay.
He is the last class?
Yep.
I think so, yeah, for you guys. The BTC one will probably go in another week because Karen's going to be doing 2 weeks with Acts, and then I'll be doing church government, which I think I should be able to cover in one night.
Church government.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All righty.
Okay. Well, go ahead and shut the recording off. Screen locks are a mixed blessing.